safety, no work online meeting. We've got a whole range of speakers tonight. I think there's 6 speakers altogether. But to start with, we're going to have an introduction from Bonnie. Okay, over to you, Bonnie.
One second. Right. So this first part is not meant to take very long at all because it's actually stating pretty much what we all should know. Our title of our meeting is focused on how workers are fighting back against COVID injustice. It's not about going through all the necessary problems. I put here, though, on this first page, some of our stickers that we produced, which we have managed to plaster around quite a bit of different parts of the country. And what we're facing really is there's been so many things that have so many different attacks on workers from both employers and government. And I'm not going into detail on any of them, but just stressing them so we know really how heroic any efforts are to fight back. First of all, I think pretty much governments have refused to admit that unsafe workplaces are really the source of the problem at all. And there's been quite a few articles. And if you look at Independent Sage as well, they've always been stressing the fact that educational settings, construction industry, various members of the various factories, food processing, etc., have been the source of COVID infections. But you don't hear about that. They don't want to stress that. They want to make it, they want to blame people for their social life rather than put the blame on the workplace where it belongs. The other thing is, key workers have been putting their lives on the line. How many thousands have died providing services to us all. And again, it's almost like it's been forgotten. And the other thing is that, in addition to putting people having to put their lives on the line, just ridiculously low wages for the jobs that people are doing. And, nurses, care workers, transport workers, a whole host of people are working for ridiculous wages in very unsafe and insecure conditions. Also, vulnerable workers are often forced to go in, and we found out recently that they located another 1.7 million people who were vulnerable, who were meant to be shielding. And this is after almost a year. So this has caused great hardship to many people. And the other thing that has come out recently as well is the fact that there's just no workplace checks on safety and no prosecutions. And it's just a joke. Employers can do exactly what they want in the workplace in terms of safety and supposedly providing a COVID secure environment. The other issue is that if workers do have to stay at home, there's just no support for them. One statistic that came out recently is that 1 in 5 workers are forced to go in even when they could work from home. So the whole, oh, you're advised to work from home doesn't work if your employer is saying you have to go in. And apparently 1 in 5 workers are being forced to go in. And it's very difficult not to do so because many people, they're afraid of losing their jobs and they need the income. Statutory sick pay in Britain is one of the lowest in Europe. So under £100 a week. So even if people were able to get it, and many workers aren't eligible for the sick pay anyway, you really couldn't afford to stay at home for such low wages for any length of time. And the other problem, which has also come to the fore, is that many workers are unable to get furlough or access the support payments that have been put in place. Many people have been refused these payments. So really, even if you did have COVID and you had to stay at home, it would be very, very difficult to do so. We are going to talk about universities today, and it's pretty apparent that the universities have put money above safety, both students and staff. I mean, the fact that they made the choice to bring people back at the start of the year anyway was just really a poor decision. Desperate to keep hold of fees and rent. The students are being ripped off right, left, and center, and the staff are under constant pressure to do face-to-face teaching. All of this, of course, we'll be hearing about from the people themselves. And of course, the employers are also using the pandemic as an excuse for other things: redundancies rather than furlough, restructuring, new contracts, firing and rehiring, and a general undermining paying conditions. And we will be hearing about some of that tonight. And of course, it's not over. Even if we get through to the end of this pandemic, there's going to be a big bill to pay. And rest assured, it's not going to be the rich who will be paying it. It's not going to be people in their offshore tax havens who are going to be coughing up the money. So already people have given their lives, and now it's going to be pay freezes and cuts and making us pay for the cost of this pandemic. And of course, business as usual for the rich and powerful. So our slogans have been basically health before profit, don't make the workers pay the cost of COVID, make the rich pay, and no to cuts and austerity. So now we're going to hear from, in that context, how people have been trying to fight back against that onslaught.
Okay, thanks very much, Bonnie. Well, I'm going to hand it over to Henry from Strike Map. Are you there, Henry? Yes, you are.
Yeah. I am, Nick, and good evening, comrades. And first of all, a big thank you to Bonnie and everyone at the campaign for inviting Strike Map tonight. It's really appreciated. As has been said, my name is Henry Fowler. I'm here on behalf of Strike Map UK. And I want to start by saying solidarity to all those in struggle and all those taking action. So the London bus workers taking action in Unite this week, those that work for Good Lord Referencing Agency Unite members taking action, the continuing important dispute at British Gas and the G&B workers taking action, the NEU members that are taking action today against the victimisation of a rep at Shrewsbury Colleges Group, those Unite members at Babcock, at RAF Leeming, they're taking action this week. Manchester buses workers are going to be taking action later in this week. UVW, Sage, nursing home workers have been taking action and continue their dispute. And starting in March, 40 days and 40 nights of strike action for the UVW cleaners at a school in Balham. So solidarity to all of those. And there are many more people, and you're going to hear some fantastic people tonight talking about the length and breadth of the struggle happening in this country today. So why did we start Strike Map is a question that we get asked, me and my colleague Rob, a lot. The aims of Strike Map are really simple, and I hope to be able to show you some of it, and hopefully you can sign up to some of our actions after this meeting or during it. So we wanted to document the levels of strike action happening across the UK. I'm someone who would count myself as interested in labour and trade union politics and keep an eye out. And it was very hard to find somewhere where all of these strikes and disputes were put in one place. We wanted to document and let those levels of strike action. We wanted to provide an easier way for people to offer solidarity. We're not going down to the local picket line much at the moment, and some unions aren't even having picket lines for their strikes. So it's really important that we know where to send that email, where to send that tweet, where to share that Facebook post, and to show that solidarity with those workers when we can't always be on that picket line. And then the last thing, the most important thing, is to encourage others in struggle and other workers to take on that struggle by seeing what's happening out there. So they were the aims of Strike Map, and we started that in December of 2020. How you can support Strike Map as we try to document and the levels and map that struggle across the UK is we'd like you to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can sign up to our email list, and you can also become a member for a fee a month. And the best thing that I think that we've done, which has really taken off, is you can affiliate your trade union branch or your trades council to us for an annual fee, all really just so that we can upgrade our website from the free WordPress that we're using. So what we've been doing since launch then, other than mapping that struggle, we've undertaken a series of strike stories where we take the raw emotion of those people undertaking strike action, and we've added their words to our website unfiltered, unedited, and purely for the audience of showing those workers taking that struggle. We've started a show called Comrades, where we bring together people from the British gas strikers, and you're hopefully going to hear from one of them tonight, to talk about Stockfire dispute, from Steve Turner at Unite talking about the incredible battle for Barnoldswick, which is a real great start to our year and a fantastic victory for all working people that we must learn from in terms of the resolution and the victory that was. We had the Nanny Solidarity Network, which are working with the IWGB to organise nannies and au pairs. And we're trying to give platforms to those interesting organising campaigns and those involved in struggles across the country. And we think it's really important that when we're building places and left medias and alternative medias, that we are giving the platform to those working people involved in struggle, not those people appointed to speak on those workers' behalf. That's really, really important. I've been given the ability by the meeting to quickly show my screen and share with you some of the aspects of strike maps. So I hope that people will just bear with me a moment as I do that. But hopefully some of you tonight can have a look and either say there's loads of action missing, I need to add my strike on there, which I hope is the case, and if not, to join us in some of our actions. So I've landed here on our strike map. You can see it's very basic. I'm no tech wizard, but you can see on all of these pins is an active strike right now. Some of them have been resolved, but we're trying to map action from December until the end of March, kind of like in a quarterly fashion, or maybe a financial year in future. So there's the fantastic Heartlands dispute. Porter's dispute in Birmingham continues to bubble on. It has got more complicated than that initial strike period. You see that. I don't have as many orange blips as I would like. They're the GMB pickets, and a lot of these pickets are at people's houses because of the nature of the dispute there. But you can see that we have all sorts of things like self-organised couriers taking action on that one day at Stuart Delivery, and they continue a dispute there over pay. Actually, it's really important. And there is new strikes. You can see there the bus workers strike in London that started this week. That's been added there. And you can see that the point of it is that we have the places to send solidarity, which in my opinion, a lot of trades union branches and organisations don't get right. They don't make it easy, and they don't make it public about where to send that solidarity. And for all of you who have been involved in strike action and picket lines, that is really important, especially when you're involved in a really bitter, difficult dispute where you're going to be taking action for a long time, like those UVW cleaners at that school in Balham with 40 days worth of action, which I think is fantastic. University of East London, another strike this week. So that is how the strike map looks. It definitely looks better on desktop, but we're trying to fundraise through those schemes I've talked about to make our site a bit better and a bit more user friendly. I'm then coming on to what I call the strike stories. So you'll see here, so if you want to know more about the dispute at that school in Balham, there is a strike story there. There is Good Lord, who are on strike this week, as I said, the referencing company. There's a fantastic article, our first ever strike story from Ash, who's an engineer in Cheshire, part of the GMB dispute. You want to read about why people are on strike today at Shrewsbury Colleges Group over the victimisation of John Boken. You can. UVW dispute there around Sage Nursing Home in North London. The security staff on strike at Royal Berkshire hospitals over a pay rise, and the battle for Barnoldswick that I talked about. So please do share and support that. A major part of Strike Map is about ensuring that we give a space for worker writing, and it's really important that we revive that idea of the workers' inquiry. So there's excellent people doing some of that work and continue to do it. So the last bit I wanted to show you really is to take action. So you can sign up as a supporter for free and become part of our email list. That's really important so that we can start being able to tell people about all of these disputes in a coherent way. You can become a member for a fee and start to help us build a better site, but then also to support worker generated and worker power content. You can join our WhatsApp group to find out the new things that we're involved in. So if you've been in it already, you know that we've been trying to push people to come to this meeting tonight. We think it's a really important time to discuss these things. And you can affiliate your trade union branch and trades council. We've also recently, like I said, for our show Comrade, we've launched a show where we're giving platforms to groups of workers, those that are winning disputes, those that are organising in this difficult time, and those that are taking that strike action, so that we can continue to give them support and hear from them, not so much necessarily the officers or the staff of trade unions, but to hear from the ones and those involved in the disputes, and that's really important. I'm probably coming to the end of my time, and you've got some fantastic speakers, which I'm really excited to hear myself. But I'll end by saying that Bonnie set out a really good context of where we sit as a trade union and labour movement. And it is absolutely right. We do face, if we do not organise, another decade of austerity. We do face the possibility of balancing the coronavirus pandemic bill on the backs of working people. But I'll say to you all on this call is that there are people up and down this country right now who are taking strike action, who are involved in all sorts of different types of action that aren't necessarily through the formal ballot procedures under the trade union legislation. We need to support and link those strikes together, from the fire and rehire in British Gas to the fire and rehire in Manchester buses. I think there is time now for a united joint union, joint organisation such as this campaign group to get behind an end to fire and rehire. We need to harness the power of Westminster, definitely, but we must harness the powers of our community in the workplace, and it has to be there, the site of struggle, as we continue to build a better tomorrow. If we act united and together, I believe things like Strike Map and the other actions that are happening, that we can actually win a better world for everyone. And I don't think it has to be like that. We face a possibility of that quite bad scenario that Bonnie outlined earlier, or we have a world to win. And I suggest all of us take the world to win option. Thank you very much, comrades, and thank you very much for the invite.
Okay, thank you very much. Now over to, I think it's David is speaking about what's happening in education. Are you there, David?
The mate. David Bailey.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Over to you, David.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for inviting me to speak. I'm glad to hear other people's stories and also hopefully share our story. I'm the branch president of University of Birmingham, UCU, for the last year or so. I think the idea was I said I would speak about our campaign that we had to try to resist working on campus and to insist on working in from home only, unless it's the work required people to be on campus, which is only in a few limited cases. So previously I just talk through a little bit the story. I'm aiming for 10 minutes, I think. As Bonnie said at the beginning, there was lots of concern over the summer about the move to reopening the universities in September. Joe Grady, the General Secretary of UCU, came out in August with quite a lot of kind of media coverage around the idea that the universities reopening was going to be a major cause of the second wave of of COVID, especially around the slogan of care homes, that the universities would be the care homes of the second wave. And at that point, we basically, within our branch at the University of Birmingham, tried to put pressure at the local level to back up the same claim, to say that we wanted online work or working from home only unless it was absolutely necessary, which has basically been our demand all along, right up until now, although obviously we're in the lockdown, so it's not quite so pressing currently. And so basically what we did leading up to the reopening of the universities, we went through lots of consultation, lots of risk assessments, trying to point out all of the flaws in the university's plans, documenting multiple problems with the risk assessments, with the lack of ventilation in multiple buildings, that the distances in the classrooms had been measured wrongly in one instance, and so we could get someone into the classroom and measure the way they'd measured the necessary distance, which they'd done wrongly. Highlight the problems in terms of how they would monitor the access to the campus and so on. And the basic response was that no, we're going ahead. And as Bonnie said again at the introduction, no, we're going ahead was very much driven by concern over what would happen if students didn't get the education they'd been promised, especially thinking about fees and demands for free refunds, but also especially thinking about demands for rent rebates and how that would work out in terms of the university finances. So they were completely adamant, basically, that they were going ahead, that it would be in their language, it would be COVID secure. The Vice Chancellor also came out with this idea that what we needed was to recreate a buzz on campus, which we thought was incredibly irresponsible, and he didn't. He just basically carried on largely saying there won't be a second wave, everything's safe, everything's going to be fine, and we need to just carry on as we're going. It will be COVID secure. We'll put lots of measures in place, and it caused major anxiety, obviously, for people, especially leading up to the start of term when the students were returning, and the concern that people had about going back into the classroom was massive, and it caused huge amounts of anxiety. Some people became ill as a result and weren't able to go anyway because of the illness that they'd suffered as a result of that anxiety. And there wasn't any blanket exemption for people with medical conditions. You basically had anybody that wanted to claim they had a medical condition and therefore not be forced to return to in-person working on campus had to go to occupational health and basically make a case. So that you couldn't simply say, I've got diabetes, therefore I shouldn't be working. You had to go to basically plead to occupational health. And then what they used was a COVID age calculator. So I actually I do have type 1 diabetes, which meant that my COVID age was 75. And that meant I should go back to working on campus, but I should wear a face mask when I do it. And so I said, well, what would I have to do to be to have my COVID age high enough to be given a permission to only work at home? And the answer was 85. Fortunately, I managed to have a reasonable line manager who could sort of read between the lines and did allow me to work online. But the university position was that there's no blanket exemption. They kept also, they have this thing where they constantly refer to the Director of Public Health. So they would say, well, we've met the Director of Public Health on a weekly basis to consult and the Director of Public Health is completely convinced this is all completely safe. And so leading up to the reopening of the campus in last September, we basically found the Director of Public Health on Twitter and tried to sort of ask him what's going on. How come you claiming this is all going to be COVID secure? It doesn't look very COVID secure. The schools had opened about 2 weeks earlier and produced a massive spike in infections, and it seemed extremely likely the universities reopening were going to do the same thing. He at the time took the first week of term off and posted on his Twitter account photos in a Michelin star restaurant in London, whilst we were sitting there getting petrified about the prospect of re-entering a workplace that he was being used to reassure us that it was all going to be safe. And so we tried to, actually, can I have access to the chat so I can post some links? Do you mind? We had access to, so we basically we contacted him and encouraged our members to contact him and ask, this can't be right. How can this be considered safe? And in the end, we wrote an open letter to him and the university saying, look, we documented huge numbers of transgressions of the so-called COVID secure conditions and set them out and said, this can't possibly be COVID secure, what's going on? And his response basically was to block us on Twitter and accuse us of cyberbullying. He did eventually say, yes, we will send you a letter, but I'm going to co-write it with the university. And to which we said, well, the whole point is that presumably you're being set up as an independent person to validate the university's claims, but yet you'll only co-write a letter with them. And essentially it was that they meet weekly to have a cozy chat. And then they would produce this jointly written letter, which they would send back to us, which we're still waiting for. So I think that might not ever arrive. Anyway, so we basically decided, okay, well, what we'll try to do is build up pressure. We documented in detail the problems that we'd seen. We declared a dispute with the university over the reopening of campus and their refusal to do it in negotiation with the union and rather to impose the conditions on us. And we had a consultative ballot of members, which we got about 50% turnout and about 80% in support of the position that we adopted. And what we basically took in terms of industrial action was to say, well, we don't need to do strike action. Our industrial action will simply be the demand that we're seeking. So the industrial action proposed was action short of strike to work only off campus, unless it's absolutely necessary to return to campus. So our action would have been the thing we wanted. So it was would have worked out quite well. We got then we tried to get permission from the UCU nationally, who did we felt a bit drag their feet in terms of giving us that support and asked us to do a second consultative ballot. So we had to do a second one organised by HQ, which also got about 50% turnout and also got about an 80% support amongst members. And that then put us to about early November. So the problem obviously at that point is that you've got about an 8-week period that before starting the ballot and actually being able to take the strike action. And if you're trying to avoid teaching during that term, you basically can't make it work. So we tried. So the plan of the action was to start the first day of term of the next term, which was 1st of February. So basically went from mid-November to mid-January balloting with about a 6 weeks open ballot period. And we basically we got 49.1%, which was 12 votes short of the 50% turnout that we needed to be able to take the strike action. So in that sense, it was not a happy ending. I think in terms of what we did achieve, though, we definitely raised awareness and put considerable pressure on the university. At one point, we got an extended interview on Channel 4 News, which we were quite pleased about, but we got quite a lot of media coverage generally around the issue. It did put the pressure on the university because they constantly had to reassure us again that things were COVID secure. We could take any transgression to them in weekly consultation meetings that they put on. And in that sense, they did sort of take things a bit more seriously. They did also, by early January, essentially agree that in principle, they would allow us to have only on-campus working for those who agreed to do it, which became our kind of fallback demand. If it's not everybody off campus, at least only make those who are willing to go on campus, go on campus. We were basically right in terms of whether it's going to cause a spike in infections. There's a massive spike in their two wards rather, directly next to the university. And the student population went from about 0 level of COVID to about 1,000 per 100,000 around October in the first 2 weeks. And then that was the only place in the whole city where there was any COVID at that point. And it just spread outwards from the university. So it's completely obvious that that was the main aggravating factor. I'll also share the open letter here just because I'm sharing links. And so just kind of reflections on what that meant. Basically, we didn't get the ballot result. In a sense, it hasn't quite mattered so far because the lockdown has meant that when we planned to take the action, it wouldn't have anyway been able to have happened. We definitely put the pressure on the university and made them kind of take us more seriously. Any problems like ventilation and so on, we could get them to deal with straight away because they were trying their best to convince everybody else that we were unreasonable troublemakers. And I think I think probably the one kind of point of irritation for us within the branch was this kind of requirement to have a second consultation. We done one and we got the 50% and the support from members. We did the second one, which HQ had kind of forced us to do, which we didn't particularly want to because it delayed things and it confused members, because we then had to say, hey, we're now starting the third ballot to basically ask you to confirm what we've asked you twice before already. And I think that was a little bit unhelpful. But I mean, and also final point, obviously UCU nationally have just committed to being stronger in terms of using Section 44. So that hopefully will also be something we can use a bit more going forward. Thanks.
Well done.
Okay, thank you, David. That's very informative. We're going to go over to Donna now, who's going to talk about the situation of support staff in education. Okay, over to you, Donna.
Hello, thank you, Nick. Good evening, everyone. My name's Donna. I am a G&B branch representative. I'm branch president. I'm still in that mindset that I'm still in work with everybody. So as Nick has said, we're the support staff union, and although the media are very quick to point out that schools are closed, we're aware that they're not closed. There are still pupils in school. You know, from the first lockdown back in March last year, it was just key worker and vulnerable students. Support staff and teachers were on rotas. They were going in, sharing the workload. And then I suppose I want to add a note on that this government have got it wrong at every step of the way when it comes to schools and workplaces, and particularly schools, because back in June, when they said we're going to put the Year 6 pupils back in to start with, within 12 hours. So that was a Sunday night. By Monday morning, they'd hit schools with the fact that actually it's going to be reception children, year 1, year 2, plus year 6. So teachers, head teachers, schools, they've not had the opportunity to plan properly and make the workplaces safe at every step of the way. They just, here's some information, run with it, you know. And I'd take you back to what happened in our borough in just before Christmas. So Greenwich was all over the news as our lovely council leader, and I'm going to say lovely, and I actually mean lovely at this point. He decided that the R rate in Greenwich was just increased. I think it was going up 49% every 4 days with this new strain that was discovered or emerged, whichever word you want to use. And so he decided that, I will say, with the force of G&B telling him we're going to take our members out on strike if he doesn't actually make their workplaces safe, he closed the schools on the Monday. Then on the Tuesday, every school was hit with a threat of prosecution letter by Nick Gibb, the Education Minister. And then on the Wednesday, schools then had to reopen wider. And I want to say, actually, he didn't want to close schools. He wanted to move to online learning for the last 4 days of term. That's all. Children weren't going to miss out on their education. Those who didn't have online access, every single school within the borough catered for those children because the work was printed off and hand delivered at their doors. So, yeah, and on that Wednesday, when the schools wider opened again to all pupils, in fact, parents spoke with their feet and refused to send the children in. So numbers were very low before Christmas. Then we had the debacle on the 30th of December, when the government announced that some boroughs in London, their schools were going to stay closed, but other boroughs, they're going to remain open. And one of those schools was Greenwich. One of the boroughs was Greenwich. And obviously we were not happy. We felt it was a political move. And if you actually looked at the list at the time, Tory boroughs were the ones that they'd closed. And the argument that we had to the government was that the R rate in those schools were actually far less than in the Labour ones that they decided to keep open. So I think there was about a 4-day battle of going back and forth, when the lovely Gavin Williamson, and when I say lovely, I don't mean the lovely in this sense, that Gavin Williamson decided that no, all London schools will remain shut due to the R rate and send the rest of the country's children in on that Monday, the 4th of January. And, you know, it's just absolutely ridiculous how it's all happened. So that's the bit of the background. And then I don't like to speak ill of my union, but the national schools at G&B sent out a letter on the Sunday evening saying, we can't support the Section 44 that the NEU are using because it's quite unprecedented. We don't think it can be used in this instance because are you in a serious and imminent danger? So you can all go back to school. And, you know, you can imagine the amount of emails that we received alone within our branch was just ridiculous. So I spoke to my region's health and safety officer, and it was like, what can we do to support our members in staying safe and not going back to work? And we used the health and safety regulations, the management of health and safety at work regulations, you know, to say the risk assessments need to be up to date. They need to include all these, like the social distancing. And because again, although schools were closed in London, we all know that they're not closed because you've got the key worker children, the EHCP children, you've got the vulnerable students going in. And this time, the government reclassified what a key worker was. So in some of our schools in Greenwich, we actually had 50% of students still attending during this lockdown. And now I'm going to get to the support staff because it's support staff who are in the schools. They're the ones who are looking after those key worker children and sitting with them and getting them to do their work while teachers are sat at home. The teachers are delivering the online learning at home whilst the support staff are in the buildings. Now, the data came out and I think, it showed, well, it did show that support staff were 3 times more likely to catch the virus in their workplace, whereas SEN, so those that supported children with medical needs, complex needs, SEN children, they were 7 times more likely to catch the virus in their workplace than they would have done outside. So again, this was where the battle was for G&B. It was, you know, supporting those staff in school to make sure that they could 2 metre distance, because it's impossible in a full open school. You just can't 2 metre distance at all. So were they able to wear face masks or coverings in schools? And a lot of head teachers say no, because the guidance is out there saying from the government, oh, they don't need it. You know, schools are safe, even though 6 weeks ago schools were a vector of transmission of the virus. All of a sudden, they're all back in again from March the 8th. And the government have done absolutely nothing to ensure that schools are safe in this time that they've been out. So once again, workplaces are schools are scrambling to make those places safe. And it's, you know, teachers work really hard, but actually it's the support staff that are backbone of the schools. They're the ones that are the ones in close contact with the pupils. They're the ones being asked to cross the bubbles, because that's something else we're finding. Even though they're in the risk assessment, head teachers are put in, there shouldn't be a crossing of bubbles. If somebody's off sick, like if there's a teacher off sick, they'll ask a support staff to move bubbles and go and look after that one. So, you know, they could be in one bubble in the morning, you know, pick up the virus from a student that's asymptomatic in the classroom, then they move into another bubble, and then they're spreading it to them. You know, can't impress enough just how hard the support staff work. And I know of a few schools in Southern region, which is where we're based, that we've had to put in collective grievances for the support staff to ask for a fair rota where it's a teacher in school as well as the support staff, because why should they be the lowest paid workers in the schools? Why should they be the ones who are actually losing their lives? So, yeah, we've worked extremely hard across the UK to support staff to stay in school, stay safe, be paid, because I don't know, I'm sure in some of your workplaces, the other issue is that they're being told to self-isolate. And although they're on the NJC terms and conditions that say, yes, when there's an infectious disease, you're at home on full pay, academy staff who aren't usually on these terms and conditions being told, well, yeah, you can stay at home, but you're not going to be paid for it. Or another thing we've been finding with support staff is they've been sent home to self-isolate or been identified as self-isolating through the NHS app. They go home, they have the PCR test, the COVID test, it comes back negative, and then the head teachers are saying to them, well, it's negative, you can come back in now. You know, don't worry about the self-isolation period that you're meant to do. We're short-staffed, you know, so it's just a constant battle for support staff against unscrupulous head teachers, you know, because you've got your really good schools and good head teachers who are fixated on keeping everybody safe. And then there's the other ones who are just like, no, you've got, you know, get in, you've got to work. So, yeah, it's been a real uphill battle since last year, really, and it's going to be an even worse battle come March the 8th, when all pupils are in. And once again, the teachers are usually right at the front of the class with a little bit of tape on the floor to measure out their 2 metre distance, and then the support staffs are the one who are having to weave in and out of the students, putting themselves at risk. So watch this space, watch the R rate rocket for a few weeks in March, and let's just pray we don't go into another lockdown. So thank you very much for inviting me along today and listening to the struggles.
Yeah, thank you very much, Donna, for that. We've got a final speaker coming up now. That's Darren, who's going to speak about the situation with the gas workers. Oh, sorry. Yes. Sorry. There's someone speaking from from Coventry. Who is that, please?
Hiya.
Hi. It's Indica. Yeah. Sorry, I missed you. You're not on my list. Don't know why. Okay. Over to you, Indica.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll start by introducing myself. So I'm Indica, I'm 21. I'm a final year psychology student at Coventry University, and I'm the angry student that started the rent strike at the university. So as you're probably all aware, there's been national rent strikes going on. There's many universities, I think there's 45 upwards of now. Potentially we've finally hit 50. Universities who have individually taken on a rent strike to fight against the fact that majority of us have been told to pay money for a room that the government told us we were not allowed to return to. Personally, for me, that was £2,300 for the 3 months that I was not allowed to return to that they wanted. They wanted it straight up, outright, and I was quite frankly beyond angry when they asked for it. The audacity of them to even consider it, and that's how this started. So we, like many others across the country, are going on rent strike. We tried to take the power into our own hands with the January rent. So we went out and we got everybody to cancel their direct debits and recurring card payments. And the university went behind our back and they changed the reference on the bank account so that they could take every single person's payment by recurring card payment. We were shocked, frankly, but they did what they did. So they took the power out of our hands totally. And at that point, we had no option but to go out and try and raise awareness and get as many people as possible to try and join the rent strikes for April when the next £2,300 was due. We came up with a bunch of pledges, which were democratically voted in. And these included a full refund on rent paid for the 2020 and 2021 academic year. We're aware of the fact that many international students had to pay their rent outright before they were even allowed to move in. And then because of COVID, many of them didn't even return to the UK. So they paid £7,000 outright for a room that they will never see. And the university is refusing to refund that from September onwards. We want no discrimination or disciplinary reaction for the university against staff or students as far as the rent strike goes. So I personally, from doing this rent strike, have been threatened with withholding my degree if I don't pay my accommodation fees. We've been threatened in various ways, and thankfully all it's done is make me angrier and more passionate about it. But for many students, it scared them out of taking action. So we're in a position where there's a lot of students who simply are just too afraid of the university threatening them. We're being bold in these. We want free education. We think we should have free education. Frankly, the fact that I'm paying £9,250 for a degree at the moment, which is pre-recorded lectures and 2 hours of seminars a week in my final year of university, it's embarrassing, it's frustrating, and it just shouldn't be the case. We are aware of the fact as well that international students, their fees actually went up this year by about £2,500. So they're paying more this year, despite the fact that many of them aren't even in the country, and the majority of them will have had their teaching time cut in half. We want them to increase mental health support. So this is a recurring theme across many universities, but the mental health services are absolutely empty. There's nothing there. Counsellors, there might be 2 of them for about 25,000 students, if you're lucky. Trying to access them at this point is damn near impossible, and it's just not good enough. I mean, during COVID, the university promised that if people were isolating, they'd check up on them, they'd make sure that everyone was okay. They were supposed to give weekly calls. There was a student in my accommodation who died in his room of COVID, and he was in there for 2 weeks before anybody found him because they weren't doing his checkups. That's where you're at with Coventry University, and they justified this. They didn't even tell the students who lived in the accommodation. So this happened in my accommodation where I live, and the only reason he was found was because students were complaining that it was rotting, his body was rotting, and they found him purely through maintenance. It's vile, it's disgusting. And when the university were confronted with this, they denied any responsibility. It wasn't their fault. And actually, the Coventry Live got hold of it before the university even decided to tell the students. So we found out through a newspaper. We want the university to provide support for staff through things like technical support. We are so aware of the fact that we are asking staff to move their teaching online, and a lot of them don't have the resources. They don't have access to resources. And because of that, teaching has struggled. We have struggled. We found that all our lectures and things are pre-recorded. We've not had access to the things that we'd usually have. There's no opportunity for any collaborative work at all, really. And on top of that, teaching time has been cut in half. My seminars have halved this year for my final year of university compared to my first year. And frankly, we don't blame the staff, because we think that they've not been given the resources to provide us with the teaching that they deserve to be able to provide us with. We want the university to publish a breakdown of income. So we have found this year that the university are refusing to tell us where our money's going. And frankly, we're sick of it. They keep building accommodation after accommodation after accommodation. There's no students moving into them. They end up empty and then they end up selling them off. But when we're begging them to put money into mental health services, they're telling us they haven't got the money available. Or when we're begging them for rent rebates, they're telling us they haven't got the money available. They've clearly got money available. They just don't care enough about students and staff to give us it or to spend it in any way that will benefit us at all. We would like no COVID job losses at the university. And this is where we have kind of come into linking up with unions. So we are incredibly grateful for the fact that we've got support from Unite the Union, we got support from UCU and ACORN, all the Coventry branches specifically, but they've all supported us in kind of our motion, our pledges, and it's been incredibly beneficial for us to create that relationship with staff, which often is not there at universities. Because of that, students don't understand how difficult life is for staff at universities. They just see them as frustration. They blame them for the situation that we're in. And we're very aware of the fact that we need to spread the word that it's not staff's fault, it's the university's fault, because they're not doing anything to benefit staff nor students. And we understand that these demands are radical, but we are very aware of the fact that universities don't respond to you nicely asking something. They respond to you threatening them and them being afraid, and only then do they decide to respond. A fight initially began with the purpose of saving student finances about a couple of months ago, but since then we've learned just incredibly how corrupt the whole education system is. We've been trapped. We have been trapped. We were promised things. We were told to return to campus in September on the promise of a normal university experience. People who had just finished their A-levels were promised to go to university and have this normal, safe university experience. We ended up on a campus where all our teaching was cancelled. We were trapped in accommodation that weren't caring enough to even check up on the students being alive. And we were on a campus where face masks weren't enforced. They were suggested, they weren't enforced. And students ended up gathering in certain spaces, which just ended up in an absolute overload of students in the hub. Which made it dangerous, and a lot of people were too afraid to even go out at university. They'd moved to university, it might have been their first time in a whole new city, and they were terrified to even leave their rooms. We've seen students forgotten about. We've been threatened for fighting back and saying anything. We've had staff contracts changed, so now the holidays at Coventry University have been changed. They're wanting them to take them at really awkward times, which is not beneficial to neither staff nor students, but the university is claiming that it'll save them a little bit of money. We've lost lecturers, so we had the wage bands at Coventry University have been changed, so they got rid of one of the pay bands and asked staff to accept the one below, and if they didn't, that was their job gone. So I personally have lost 6 lecturers in the past 3 weeks, just in psychology alone, because they told them that if they didn't accept this thing, they were going to have to go. So people have gone. They've gone to Birmingham City, they've gone to Bath, where the wages were acceptable. We've seen unsafe university conditions. We've seen the student hub become an overfull gathering space. We've had students having no option but to isolate because they've been in contact with a student on campus, because the university didn't bother to put in any kind of testing facility until they decided that students were going home at Christmas. We've seen mental health services absolutely capacity and nothing to offer the growing number of students suffering through the pandemic. We've seen senior management make excuse time after time after time for the way that they're treating students. So we were fortunate enough, kind of, to have a meeting with senior management, and in that they made a presentation where they justified our tuition fees and our accommodation fees and why they weren't giving us any of them back. That was it. They blatantly lied to our face, insulted us, and just treated us kind of as the products that we are. They just made it so incredibly obvious that that's what they think of us, and frankly that's just lit a flame under a lot of people, which we can only be grateful for. We see them refusing to address student issues whilst they're building new accommodation and renovations of buildings. And like staff, we are angry, we are sad, and we are tired. We are just tired of being used as some product that the university allows to just roll in, make some money off of us, and throw us out at the end of 3 years. And it's frankly not good enough. We've got no option but to fight back. We've had no option but to tell them that enough is enough. I don't think they were expecting the fight back that they got this year, and I'm glad for that, because they weren't prepared for the amount of students that were going to tell them that we're angry and we're sick of this. We deserve better. Education has become absolutely, totally just, you walk in, pay them a lot of money and walk back out and hope for the best. We're not having it anymore. We stand in solidarity with you together, staff and students, hopefully. Us with the ECU branches and the Unite branches, we can finally make a change and make this better for staff and students. And thank you for listening.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Indica. Now over to our final speaker, which is Darren, who's going to speak about the situation of gas workers. Over to you, Darren.
I've worked for British Gas for 16 years. In the 16 years, I've had 4 pension changes and 5 terms and conditions changes. And the company approached the unions last year to announce another one. So right at the beginning of the pandemic, March last year, the company held a town hall meeting with 20,000 employees, the whole of Centrica British Gas, to say that it's going to be a rocky year. They can see obviously that it's going to end out to be in a pandemic and lockdown. So we all need to club together. So amongst the engineer group, which is about 7,000 of us, we arranged for specific engineers to go into COVID homes, so we knew who they were. We volunteered for the Trussell Trust to donate to food parcels and donate to the vulnerable. Behind the scenes, we were unaware that the senior leadership team, which is Matthew Bateman, Rob Harris and Chris O'Shea, were preparing to tear up our terms and conditions. They wrote to the unions, GMB, Unison and Unite in June last year to say that they wanted to modernise terms and conditions. A week later, the talks started, and on the first day of talks, they informed the unions that they had actually filed a Section 188 notice, so a fire and rehire. So theoretically going into negotiations with a loaded gun, that if they didn't like the way the negotiations were going, come April the 1st this year, they would fire and rehire all members of staff that hadn't agreed to the new terms. So the company announced the new terms and conditions offer in December. And if we signed by the 23rd of December, they would offer a £2,000 inducement or bung to everyone that signed. If they then signed by the 5th of February, they would get enhanced terms. So if you work around London like I do, we get London allowance. If you're the wrong side of the M25, they're actually going to deduct that London allowance to the equivalent of £5,000. So if you didn't sign by the 5th of February, you wouldn't get that £5,000. So they tried the £2,000 one in December and then the £5,000 one in February. In January, we started industrial action. We've now done industrial action throughout the whole of February on every Friday, Saturday, Sunday and Monday. We announced yesterday that we're now going to do every Friday, Saturday, Sunday and Monday in March as well. UCAS have got involved. Chris O'Shea, who is the chief executive, was pulled in front of the Parliamentary Select Committee, which we're going to hopefully find out tomorrow in regards to the fire and rehire notice that was served. Now, we all understand that if a company like BA had to ground their planes and was physically not being able to earn any money, that the company would be in dire straits. Now, to give you some background, British Gas in 2019 made £901 million profit. In the first 6 months of COVID, so between January and the end of May last year, they made a 27% increase in profits, the equivalent of £229 million. Chris O'Shea, who's the chief executive officer at the moment, took the role in a full-time position in April last year and doubled his wages. So his wages were £300,000. He went to £700,000. Now, before Chris took over as chief executive officer for Centrica, he was actually a chief finance officer from 2018. And in his tenure from 2018 to when he took the helm, our share price dropped 75%. So there's obviously something wrong there. We understand that things need to change. What they're asking to change is they want us as an engineer population to work 156 additional hours a year, which is equivalent to a month's worth of work for no wages. They want us to agree to a pay freeze for 3 years. They want us to agree to a pay decrease in overtime rates, lose weekend retainers. So we offer a 7-day-a-week service, 24 hours a day. They want to cut any retainers that we've got. They want to reduce holidays, sign us up to a bonus scheme, which is non-contractual, so it can be changed at any time. But they're saying that we'll be able to earn all this money back via the bonus scheme that they can change at any time. The bonus scheme, the first offer that they brought to us in December was run if you went into a negative hours on the bonus scheme, they could actually force you to work a weekend for nothing. They have subsequently changed that, but this is what we're dealing with. We've got a vote on the latest offer, which was brought to us yesterday, and they've put another inducement of £2,000 for next year. So they've brought the inducement from the 23rd of December back on the table. We can get that in April. They've brought the £5,000 that everyone lost on London waiting. We can get that in April. And now they've put another, whatever you want to call it, bung at the end of the end of this year in January, that we'll get another £2,000 to try and get this through. And obviously, a lot of guys have lost 20 days now of pay, and it was surprising that a lot of them thought we'd actually get paid on strike. So it's good. We've got at the moment about 87% turnout on industrial action. I'm on the picket line down in Sidcup where we are, and we have a turnout of around 40 to 50 engineers down there every day, which is great. The public support has been brilliant. We even had the London Ambulance Service pull over, donate £1,000 to our strike fund and give us a hamper full of drinks and sweets. So it has been really good. I'd like to say that the current government have been supportive, but they haven't. I think when you've got to go back 150 years to when your government done something for workers' right, like Jacob Rees-Mogg did and Lord Shaftesbury, I think they're scraping the barrel there. But the Labour supporters have been brilliant. We had Clive Efford, who's the Labour MP for Eltham, come down the picket line on the first day of industrial action. Sir Keir Starmer has done a couple of videos for the GMB. But it's one thing, they could take fiery hire off the table and it would be made illegal. I know Henry mentioned it earlier. That's all it needs. It's so frustrating that a company like British Gas are using this awful pandemic as an excuse to use fiery hire, and other companies are going to try and get on the bandwagon before potentially it is ever made illegal. It's illegal for most European countries. It just seems that we've got this archaic rule that's stayed there. But yeah, I don't know if anyone's got any questions or anything.
We'll go over to question and answers for all of the speakers afterwards, actually. Have you finished your speech now, have you, Darren? Yeah, smashing. All right, so now we're going to have a question and answers time period. Bill, next to me in the gallery, is going to be taking a tally of who's speaking.
Questions in the chat, or say you want to
Yes.
ask a question, I can tell Nick.
All right, and I'd like you to ask you to keep things civil and polite and try not to interrupt as well. Okay, so any questions? Anyone? Don't all rush. Like a Quaker meeting, isn't it?
This is embarrassing, isn't it?
You don't want to speak, do you, Rob?
Yeah, on the
Yes,
subject
all right,
of fire, on the subject of fire and hire, I mean, it seems to be, it's like a snowball rolling this, and it'd be, it's how do these things need to link up, really? You know, it's, I mean, not really a question, it's a comment, but these things need to be linked up, and it's how do we go about doing that? You know, if anyone's got any thoughts on that, not just the fire and hire, but all the other strikes as well. And I think the strike map's a great thing, you know, because it brings a lot of these things that are going on, which might have been isolated before. It's bringing these together, but there's got to be some sort of coordination against the fire and hire system. You know, how we go about that.
The frustration that we've found is that we've all written to 20 odd thousand of us have written to our local MPs, and if they're a Conservative MP, you just get a generic statement back, and it's they're not even educated. In the generic statement, it says redundancies are hard. Well, fire and hire isn't a redundancy. If it was a redundancy, I would have taken it, and that's one of the biggest hurdles we've had. Is the Conservatives don't really show any interest in wanting to learn what fire and hire is.
Sorry, it's Donna. Can I just add into that as well? I think I'm trying to find it, but I know there was another fire and rehire case that went to court, and the judge ruled it lawful, unlawful. Sorry, thank you. Yes, it was the Tesco's. It was in distribution, wasn't it? So I think there should be, you know, that's the test case, and I don't think there was as many people involved in that as there is with the British Gas rehire and refire. Fire and rehire. Sorry, it's a bit late. I've been on it all day. It's a shambles. It's you know, and I'm just really proud to be a part of the union. And Darren, I've been past your picket line several times. My nan's 86 and she's shielding. She has dementia, but she used to be a union rep. Back in the day when, you know, unions were supported, and there was a union rep in every work, and we drove past one day and she was shouting out the window, all in support. And you know, she's not very animated at the minute, but to see her come alive, and then she was saying how disgusting it was. So there's solidarity from my branch, Greenwich, and a solidarity from my 86-year-old grandma as well. Keep up the fight.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Bonnie wants to ask a question, Nick. Bonnie wants to ask a question.
All right. Yes. Bonnie, your question was, what do the education think will happen after March the 8th? Yeah.
Henry also works for the NEU, and then there's Donna, and I was just wondering what they think is going to happen, whether there's going to be any fight back against going back, or whether or not it's just going to go ahead, or how's it going to unfold, do you think, over the next, and what's the unions doing about it? What are the unions actually saying?
There was a joint statement sent out by 9 schools unions on Monday, I think, before they had a meeting with the DFE and Gavin Williamson, and you know, we want a phased return by pushing all the kids back in one go. It's just absolutely ridiculous. I think it's 10 million, the number out there, with, you know, pupils, support staff, teaching staff going back into work on one day. It's going to push the R rate up, although they're saying they want secondary pupils tested, and that's how they're getting away with the phased returns. Primary school pupils are not being tested, and they're most likely to be the ones who are asymptomatic, so those not showing symptoms but carrying it. And yeah, they're the actual students that you get close to whilst you're in the classroom, you know. And little ones don't understand social distancing, and if they come running up to give you a hug, to go to a 4-year-old, no, you can't come near me, you know, that's going to give them anxiety, as particularly if they come from a vulnerable home where they are shown no love. That's just going to reiterate to them they're unlovable. And you know, we're going to have all these issues with mental health in years to come. So yeah, we've been banging at the door of the DfE. There's been numerous meetings with all the unions saying exactly the same thing. And as Darren has just said, when it comes to the Conservatives, it's the generic answer. You know, yeah, we've listened, but we're not going to do anything about it. We're just going to carry on regardless. So yeah, I don't know what Henry's got to add to that, but yeah, that's just what's going to happen. Is the R rate's going to go up, but they're in for 3 weeks, and then they've been very clever. So they've mapped out their plan with a 5-week break in between. Send the kids in first of all. Let's watch the R rate skyrocket them first 3 weeks. Then there's a 2-week Easter holiday. Then we'll see where we are with the R rate then, and then they'll push through. And personally, in my opinion, I envisage another lockdown, maybe in August sometime. So watch this space. Let's hope I'm wrong. So there.
All right. Have you got any feedback from other education workers? No. All right. I've got 3 people with their hands up. I'm going to start with Kit One. All right. Henry, could you reply to that one?
Yeah, I want to start off by being really clear. I'm not here to represent the National Education Union in any way. I'm not an elected member, nor am I mandated to do so. But I will just speak in general terms over what's been happening over the last couple of days, and I hope that's helpful and useful, Nick, and the rest of the meeting. So, any of you have conducted a survey over the last 24 hours, and we've seen 40,000 responses to that. And 91% of those people are saying about speeding up the vaccination for those workers. I think what's quite important to say is that probably this is the same with other unions, but during the pandemic, the National Education Union has put on tens of thousands of new members, thousands of new workplace reps, with people getting active in their workplace. And whatever National Executive Committee, which is obviously our supreme body other than conference, which has met today, as my understanding, to discuss these things further and the democratic decision around it, is that whatever happens, we are in a fantastic position as a National Education Union, a workplace to work with as best we can, leadership teams to do the best that we can in what is obviously been seen as what we're terming a big bang return, which is when everyone is going back together. And so it is going to be down to strong workplace groups working together with other sister unions, as Donna has talked about, and working with leaders around that. There'll be updated guidance, as there will be from all the unions, around what that looks like. But as I think Donna has articulated really well, is that we have this period now where we'll have a few weeks, then we've got over the horizon is the Easter break, and it will be about monitoring what happens there. There's no doubt about it. The SAGE minutes were very clear that the R rate will go up 50%. That's what the SAGE minutes clearly state. So it will be about seeing, but as far as I understand it, there'll be guidance. We expect workplace groups to work together with strong reps to lead that struggle in every workplace. As is the same with a lot of unions, the National Education Union isn't about what our joint general secretaries say or do, or the leadership. It is about the empowered groups of workers and members and the democratic right to exercise and to negotiate meaningfully at the workplace, which counts the most. So I hope that's helpful. But like I said, I'm not here to speak on behalf of the National Education Union.
Dan's got a question for Indika. Nick, Dan's asked to ask.
I've got 2. Yeah, but I've got 2 people with their hands up, so I think they should come first, and then we'll do those. Yeah. So Kit, next, you got your hand up. Kit 195455.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I never work out how to put a real name on. Yeah, call me Keith is fine. It's been incredibly interesting to hear about all these separate struggles that are going on. And I don't think any of us in this meeting are going to be surprised that the bosses are trying to make the working class pay, just as they are for every other aspect of the crisis that the bosses system's in. You know, let's be quite clear, COVID is just one part of the crisis that the bosses system is throwing humanity into. And so long as capitalism goes on, the working class is going to be expected to pay for the crisis of the bosses system. Clearly, it's not just in and around the workplace that we're being expected to pay. as temporary holds on evictions largely at the moment, but that's going to come to an end. And certainly in America, there's very big developments around people resisting evictions. I mean, that's another thing that our class is going to have to face up to, and in the forthcoming periods, even if we're not battered with it at the moment. See, it seems to me that one of the questions which is coming up from hearing all these disputes where individual unions are playing a role in running disputes is the fact that what we're not being able to tackle at the moment is how we actually generalize struggles out. In most workplaces, there's either workers who are in a number of unions together with workers who are in no unions, and no workplace is separate from the communities they work in, and they're not separate from other workplaces. And somehow we have to break through the system where the trade unions are constrained by the law of the land, where trade unions act on behalf of their own members, where it's incredibly difficult in a workplace to try and have meetings which take decisions on behalf of the whole workforce, rather than working within a union who are then constrained by the law and whose ability to act is constrained by the law. And we do need to start looking at, just as we had to in every other situation before COVID, we have to look at how we begin to work to establish ways of struggle which actually break through the constraints which the trade union structures and the law impose on us. So that means working towards, in workplaces, working towards meetings, assemblies, which bring in workers from any union or from no unions. We need to work out how we spread struggles from beyond one establishment or employer to try and link in with other establishments and employers. And I think it's that politics of the working class organising for ourselves, which we're going to have to start relearning, we're going to have to start working on in the next period, because the boss's offensive isn't going to go away as and when there's some sort of breathing space from COVID. The boss's offensive is going to carry on as it was before COVID, and the billions of pounds that the bosses have allowed themselves to borrow, they're going to expect us to be paying their bills for them. So we do need to find ways of generalising struggles, ways of breaking through the law, ways of breaking through the constraints that the trade unions work under. Okay, I just wanted to raise that perspective, and thanks very much actually for this meeting and for organising it. It's been very, very interesting.
Thanks a lot. I've got Thomas next.
Hi, my name's Thomas. I'm a writer for Socialist Appeal, Marxist paper of Labour and Youth. Point is kind of similar to Darren's, but I want to kind of add a few things. Like, we're in like such interesting times historically, also terrifying times. We've got the worst economic crisis in 300 years. This comes after a decade of the lowest decade of wage growth since 1810. And I think we've got to be really clear with what the perspective is that this as Kit said very well, we're going to be, the workers are going to be made to pay for this crisis again and again and again. The bosses are determined to make this happen, and we can't. And whilst we have to focus on each individual struggle, we also have to take a broader picture in how can we fight against back these people who are determined to to come for us and drain as much wealth as they can out of working people. And I think when it comes down to it, the biggest hindrance there's been to the working people in the last decade or so, or even longer really, has been this question of leadership. You've seen this with the leaders of the Trade Union Congress, Frances O'Grady. When the coronavirus breaks out, who did she immediately ally herself with? Did she not go around? Pardon? Okay. Did she not go around, kind of uniting the different unions, creating a united front to fight against any and all attacks, and injury to one being an injury to all? No, instead she united with the Tory party and the CBI, the Bosses Union, to talk about how we can kind of get through this together as a society. But we're very clear what the bosses want. They want to, they want to come for our wages. They want to worsen our working conditions. They want to send our children into unsafe schools. I'm a teacher, by the way, see this very, very clearly. Devastate the care homes, the elderly. We can have no unity with these people. We see the same in the Labour Party, where after the left has been defeated, Keir Starmer is doing the exact same thing, cuddling up to Boris Johnson. His shadow secretary, Treasury Secretary Anise Dodds, makes a speech basically reiterating the economics of the Financial Times, the need for sensible financial prudence and all of these things, i.e. more austerity being inflicted on the working people. And if we're going to fight back against these people, then what we need is a united of the workers, but also a radical one, a socialist one, ready to fight. And I think we've got to start, by really asking, how can we, transform the leadership of these organisations? Socialist Appeal has launched this recall motion to call a special conference of the Labour Party to try and get rid of Starmer and put forward to new leadership elections. We should be looking at similar things in the TEC. And this is how I would argue.
Right. We don't really want a party political broadcast here. We want to talk about grassroots action. So if you'd like to finish it up.
How can we unite the struggle? How can we fight back against the capitalists who are coming for us? That's why I want to hear people say. I think people have spoken a lot about the individual struggles. What's the bigger picture? How can we unite and fight for a better society? Solidarity, comrades. Apologies for going on, brother.
All right, I've got various questions. Apart from the strike, oh yes, Darren's answered that. There's a question about to Indica about your connections with other university students, other rent strikers around the country. Could you come back on that?
Yes, absolutely. So the individual university rent strikes have kind of turned into a national rent strike movement. So each of us nominated 1 or 2 people that are now part of a national rent strike committee who are fighting presently to take actual strike action at the beginning of April when the next rent would have been due. We're still working on that to see the issue with COVID is the strike action would have been in person. It would have been groups of students gathering. However, we don't really want to encourage that. We want to prioritise safety first and foremost. And because of that, we're looking at new ways of striking. As far as online striking is going, we're withholding actual money, threatening universities to withhold money or to kind of not attend lectures, things like that. But yeah, there is a national rent strike movement, which hopefully you'll be seeing a lot more of in the coming months.
Okay, thanks, Indica. Another question I have here is, that'll be for Indica as well and for everyone. What are the chances for everyone in education, what are the chances of resisting a return to face-to-face teaching after Easter in the universities? Anyone want to reply to that?
Sounds like Deck might have some ideas as well. The thing is, well, at least in Birmingham, if we're not going to make a decision until after Easter, then that basically means there's no teaching now until October. So there isn't going to be any face-to-face teaching, at least in our university, and I think that will probably apply relatively across the board. So in terms of the rent, it's going to make this rent situation even more contested, because it means basically people will have spent from January to October with no access to the housing, or they've been trapped in the housing and not being able to use it properly. So the rent issue is going to become even more of an issue. The universities are obviously very worried if they have to pay the money back, because it's a major source of income for them. So that's going to definitely heat up, I would have thought. The other thing is the unevenness, because it's going to mean that teaching staff won't be expected to go into the university, but other staff obviously will. So for UCU, it will be the professional services, academic related and professional services staff. And this, going back to this idea that the head of the university was saying where he wanted to create a buzz on campus. One of the ways to do that was basically to tell academic related and professional services staff that you have to go into work in the university despite not having to see anybody. So people would go into an empty office by themselves so that they could speak via Zoom to students and to other colleagues, because they wanted to create a sort of hubbub on campus, because that was good for like just creating an appearance of things back to normal to justify the fees. So that unevenness between who's going to have to go back on campus will become an issue as well, I think. But in terms of face-to-face teaching, at least in our university, there probably won't be any now until October.
Right. Okay, thanks for that, David. Rob, you wanted to respond as to what's happening in the colleges and universities.
Yeah, I work at De Montfort University in Leicester. I'm on the branch committee there. I know there are a couple of branch committee members in this meeting tonight, I spotted, lurking in the background. But yeah, I think how do we deal with this after March the 8th? I mean, it's all up in the air anyway. So far, what's going to happen depending on your local workplace, because it depends on how much we're going to fight this. And the key to fighting anything that they throw at us is to build a strong, active base in the union. There are some branches that might have a more passive union organisation or a passive membership, and there's a small group of people who might be running those unions, right? But you can't have any faith in the national organisation. You can't have any faith in the regional organisation. I mean, that's not to say there aren't people there who aren't on the right side, because there are, but that's not how these things work. Ultimately, it's down to us in our workplaces, and it's how we organise in our workplaces. So what this comes down to is it's engaging with people in your workplaces. It's talking to people in your workplaces, and that's a lot more difficult now because of COVID. And you know, if you are working online, it's not always easy to do that. But nevertheless, this is something that you have to do. One thing that we did in our branch was we set up an organising committee outside of the committee, the branch committee itself. And this organising committee took it on itself to produce bulletins, get people involved who weren't normally involved in union stuff, you know, and pulling more people in and getting more people active and more people involved. And that paid off. And this year the whole committee got overhauled with a lot of people off the organising committee, not new people who hadn't been that involved before in union stuff. So it's all about building engagement, you know. But even then, that's not the answer to everything, because at the branch committee level, you can get bogged down. You've got one foot in the camp of what's going on in your workplace, and you've got another foot in the camp of what regional are telling you to do, right? Oh, and you've got to follow this process. You've got to follow this procedure. We're in dispute at the moment, and it's just gone. It's just dragged on and on and on at ACAS after weeks and weeks and months, you know. And that's the union, the regional organisation seems okay with that, you know, but you know, it's not going to get us anywhere. Ultimately, it's what can we do about it, right? And then, as I say, the key is building a strong rank and file organisation in your workplaces. That is easier said than done, though. And that is easier said than done. but that's the key to it. And it's wherever you work, whether you work in education, whether you work in retail or whatever, whether you work in any industry, whether it's the gas or wherever. Okay, the important thing is, how can you engage with people and get more people involved so that people are active, right? Once we have that, if we're in a position where we do have people that are active, then the world, as they say, is our oyster. You know, we can do so much more, and then we don't have to worry on what the Labour Party is doing. We don't have to worry about who's the leader of it. We don't have to worry about what management say and what the trade union laws say. You know, what we can do is say, well, we've got weight of numbers. Fuck you. This is how it runs. You know, and we need to build that situation where we can do that.
Okay, thanks, Rob. I've got Henry next, responding to various statements. Okay, over to you,
Thanks.
Henry.
Thanks, Nick. Well said, Rob. Excellent. If you're not spending your time building the rank and file, what are you spending your time doing? Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think to come back to what Thomas and some said, because what he said is important in terms of what do we concretely do. I, like many people probably on this call, have spent the last 5 years energised by a Corbyn movement, but then when that leadership's gone, what is actually left in terms of what we've achieved in workplaces and community, and where does power lie? And I would argue that more power lies outside of Westminster, and that has to be our strategy, regardless of the leadership. So I think that chimes with what Rob said. So what some of the things we're talking about at Strike Map and Red for Key Workers, which was our initiative last May, on May Day, to get everyone to wear red in appreciation of those workers, is it's time to rebuild the National Shop Stewards Network. Now, there is an organisation with that name that does fantastic work. You'll see them at every strike, every picket, and even the work at Hinckley, the occupation this morning of Sparkies at Hinckley Point. But it's really important that we start to build that broad base Shop Stewards Network. Some people on this call may be involved in, or have seen, or a supporter of the Labour Notes organisation in America, which takes all of the rank and file trade unions, doesn't matter their sector, doesn't matter where they are geographically, and tries to bring them together. And it has physical and virtual troublemaking schools, and it tries to unite people with common demands to take to their employers and to build out into society that and generate that power from there and make real changes. And some of the fight for 15 minimum wage you've seen across fast food workers, etc., some of that work is built through organisations like Labour Notes, and it's important to think about how we can do that. Aside from that, which is, I think, ambitious to bring all those people together. So there's people like Darren taking strike action right now. There's people next week, the Unite bus workers in Manchester, that are facing fire and rehire. There's the cargo workers at Heathrow facing fire and rehire. That's 3 sets of workers right now facing fire and rehire. I suggest if we get Darren and some of those workers together in a room, maybe we can build a strong working class that can take forward demands, not just being on the defensive about fire and rehire, but start to really reshape employment in this country and putting the dignity and putting the power back in the hand of the worker. And I believe we can do that, and we should be doing that in this period. But if you're not doing that, for me, it's getting involved in whatever your local branch is. It's linking with the GMB workers that are closest to you. It's linking with all those other people taking strike, and hopefully our strike map acts as a place where you can go, all right, those people on strike, I'll see out their local branch near me. I think also, having come from an area where there was no trades council, I think they are an underused and underthought about organisation and institution. And I think the late Bob Crow used to say this a lot, that we should be revitalising and taking back the trades council as an important organising vehicle. And I believe they can be, with the thousands of more people involved and interested in trades unions. And we've seen how important trades unions have been for lots of things. I think that we should be starting to use that as a clear vehicle to bring people together. And I think that we could start doing that today if we're not already doing that. So I think those are concrete steps that we should be taking. So if you're in a workplace without a rep, become a rep, speak to workers about getting involved in the union. If you're in a workplace that has a rep, become a joint rep, or link up with other branches and other trades unions to build that struggle outwards, because people are facing the same backlash. And if we don't act together, we will be picked off. So it's really important that we act together. I'll end by saying that people will have seen across America, Teamsters just won a pay increase in New York at Hunts Point food market, which procures 60% of all the fresh fruit and veg in the New York area. And they've just won that strike by standing together and building that strength in the community. And then a few years ago, you saw across the whole of Arizona, Oklahoma, West Virginia, educators, rank and file educators, not waiting for leaderships, not waiting for what their local chapter said, taking action in states where it's illegal to take action over the changes to their health insurance scheme and the imposition of things like Fitbits. And they were united and they brought out state by state. So these things are possible. This struggle is happening. We've seen what's happened in India, it continues to happen in India with farmer struggles. These things are there and available. And by being involved in calls like this and linking up the people who are leading some of these struggles, I think that we're in a really positive place. The difficult and hard place to be in is when there is no struggle. And at the moment, there is plenty of it. So I think we can unite those things together and let's build a national shop stewards network to take us into the future.
All right, I've got DK next. Got their hand out. Over to you, DK.
That is I.
Yeah.
Okay. My name's Dec. I'm a branch chair of the UCU, University of Strathclyde in Scotland, despite my accent. I'd like to really kind of express agreement with what Rob was saying earlier about how it is about organising at a rank and file level. It is about getting people engaged, talking to people, listening to people. And in point of fact, I would say the crisis, the COVID crisis, has actually, in some ways, seen a larger membership involvement in activity, union activity, in branch meetings, in assemblies and stuff like that, because people can just go onto Zoom and do it, and they don't have to actually turn up and take time out of whatever it is they're doing and travel and so forth. So, you know, there's been some opportunities that we can take. In terms of people going back to work in higher education, well, I think that from now until the new academic year, I think that until the end of this academic year, you are going to see management trying their luck in terms of getting ever larger numbers of students. There'll only be a relatively small number initially, but larger and larger numbers of students back, and therefore into the campuses, and therefore trying to get and possibly getting a lot of staff in as well. So I think that isn't going to be universal, it's not going to be general, but there will be local struggles that emerge. And I think what's important is when those local struggles do emerge, that we're able to circulate it, that we kind of are able to let people know what's happening, that there are sort of these ways of communicating, and also that at a local level, that we try to expand as much as we can and involve all the unions, and indeed people who aren't even in the unions, and students. I think so. So there is the possibility. I think for the most part, it will start very much with localized struggles, and it's how much we can kind of extend them and generalize them and make a, you know, kind of a bigger movement out of it is the important thing. So yeah, so I'm cautiously optimistic. The other thing is, of course, is that in higher education, we've been offered a pay freeze. That's our zero. How can you say you've been offered something? We've been told we're getting a pay freeze, 0%. And I think people will be very pissed off at that, because people have been working very hard and have been very stressed to the nines, you know, with not just like online teaching and prep and all the rest of it, but also the fact that, you know, we've had like a great deal of anxiety about, you know, whether we're going to have to go back, whether we're going to face disciplinary action if some of our staff don't go back. So then at the end of it, to get a 0% pay freeze, I think that's going to have antagonised a lot of people. But yeah, so I think there's potential, but nothing happens on its own, and it requires organisation, and it requires this kind of communication between people that we often don't do very well.
Right, have you messaged him? No.
Well, that's me.
Okay, thank you. I think Bill, you're going to say something?
Yeah, Bonnie's just asked.
Yeah.
Bonnie's just put in the chat that that the No Safety No Work campaign will publicise all of the actions that people are taking part in. And as Rob said, it is what people do themselves, I think, that's going to be the most important thing during this period. The bosses, university vice chancellors are more worried about what workers and students are actually going to do, whether it's refusing to do a particular task, refusing to go to work, refusing to pay their rent, and lobbying for reduction in tuition fees commensurate with the amount of teaching they've been getting. You can interact with us through the No Safety No Work campaign. We'll try and get your stuff out. The other people here involved in campaigns, get involved with your local union branches. Get them, get some influence in your own local union branches and get them to support these campaigns. These are grassroots people. They haven't got the finance that the bosses and the university vice chancellors have got. They need resources as much as anything else in order to fight their campaigns. So I would just ask everybody here to get involved however they can and try and assist whatever campaign is going on. And the Strike Map UK, I think, is excellent, because if all of these campaigns could be linked together, then we've got a proper grassroots movement where it's people themselves doing stuff and not waiting to be told what to do. That's all I'd like to say. Get involved with the No Safety No Work campaign, and thank you to all our speakers for coming. I've been really inspired by what you've said, and it's given me heart and hope to continue the struggle. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. And thanks to all our speakers for the meeting. Unless anybody else has got anything to say, I think we can close down the meeting. Okay. No one has anything else to say. Okay, thank you
Thanks,
very
everyone.
much.
Cheers.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Ta-da now.
Sure.
See ya.
Is it a staring match?
So Mexican standoff.
Yes, what it is, yeah. Oh my God, a fucking twat.
Well,
you have to unmute.
well, it's going to happen, isn't it? I mean, the fact that it hasn't
Well, yeah.
happened up till now is like more shocking.
Well, exactly.
But yeah, I thought it was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It